Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. We have a book review for you today for Don't Die July. Today we're talking about a new release. This is Fabulous Bodies from Chuck Tingle. This officially released on the 7th of July. Although I did get my copy a couple of days early because Waterstones did what Waterstones often does and put it on the shelf before its official release date. Also worth noting, the versions of this that are on Goodreads are not accurate to this version of the book for some reason, and neither are the Storygraph ones. So this is a paperback that comes in at 293 pages long. Let's just dive into what this book's about. So Fabulous Bodies is the fourth traditionally published book from Chuck Tingle. We're following a main character called Poppy. Poppy is a influencer. It's implied that TikTok/Reels, but it's not explicitly stated. But they are a fashion influencer by day, but they do have a dubious nighttime job as well. We see the nighttime job first. They steal corpses for on demand. They receive jobs saying we need this sort of corpse in this sort of age range. She goes, she steals them with fake credentials, delivers them, receives money. And this helps to fund her influencer lifestyle, although not necessarily to the amount that she needs it to be funded. And as we bounce into the first proper day of the story, as she gets up in the morning, she's really not a good person by any stretch of the imagination. And this is the sort of character that I like to read, but I also like to hate. Very self-centered, very self-aggrandizing, all about the appearance, very little substance, and does not treat the people around them particularly well. They seem to have one friend, a character called Noah, who they don't treat particularly well either, but kind of use as childcare on demand. They do have a daughter as well, who's 5 years old, who also seems to be suffering from a we need to keep up appearances style of lifestyle that's going on here. A lifestyle that doesn't appear to be sustainable, something that's touched on very early on with credit card bills coming through the door with apparently eye-watering amounts of money owed. The amounts aren't stated, but that's fine. But gets up for the day, isn't in the mood to do a reel that day, so goes through previous drafts to find one that fits the vibe. Nothing quite fits, and then a news story flags up, telling them that their icon from childhood, the 80s gay icon Eddie Michaels, has died in a horrific car accident mowed down at an event by a drunk driver. Genuinely upset by this, especially after watching the footage in all its entirety with bits of corpse involved. Generally upset, realizes that this is an opportunity to cash in. You know, don't let that opportunity pass. They only happen occasionally. Well, the reel goes up with crying and mascara and sadness and a power ballad from Michaels in the background that's also sad to try and get the views. Anyway, from there goes about their day. And we see some personal interactions with one of the neighbours, which just further forces home how much of an asshole this character is, along with the way she treats her daughter as well. But the day goes on, and it's a relatively normal day until she gets a phone call trying to hire her to collect a corpse. And it's a bit uncertain about this because they've got her phone number and she doesn't understand how. But the money is an eye-watering amount, £5 million. This will set her daughter up for years and will help deal with all those pesky bills. In addition, 20% paid up front. And then she's told the name of the corpse, because this is a specific corpse that is being requested, which does happen from time to time in her line of work. It's not necessarily a regular occurrence, however. And the corpse that she is to collect is none other than the bi icon themselves, Eddie Michaels. They're told all they need to do is go and collect, everything else will be dealt with. And there's a little thing in the back of her head. Just a little thing going, this sounds too good to be true, but goes along with the job anyway. Everything goes really, really smoothly. They collect the corpse. They start to drive out of Palm Springs where the story is set. And then they hear a bang in the back of the truck. They stop, they go around, the doors are open, the corpse has gone. Panic ensues, like I'm going to have to drive back, see where it's fallen out. Goes around to get the keys have vanished out of the truck. It's like, oh no. And then the lights turn on in an abandoned diner at the roadside. and music starts playing. Eddie Michaels music. She walks in, there's a man there. The man is the corpse. Eddie Michaels, still beaten up, still bruised, still broken, but most importantly, still breathing. And from here on in, we go on a bloody road trip for the rest of the story. Bloody is the emphasis here. This probably has the highest body count on page of any of Tingle's books so far. It is relentless in many regards in that, and it does a good job of building up to it slowly as well. Also worth mentioning, as we get the interaction between Poppy and Eddie, Poppy begins a not necessarily a more likable character, but we begin to understand more about her as we begin to get some revelations about her own past and realize that this is not necessarily the coincidence it initially appears to be. Now, Eddie Michaels as a character is really interesting. They're very much suffused with Beetlejuice manic energy. You have a character here that is obsessed with performance and art and fame, and very dismissive actually in many ways of the sort of fame that influencers have, doesn't really understand it, which kind of makes a little bit of sense. You have some red herrings thrown in here as well about how this character is still up and walking, which are really, really well done. And there is some other foreshadowing from early on, something that's mentioned earlier about something else entirely, which does come into play later on in the story as well. But you have a very uneven power dynamic here between Eddie and Poppy. Well, then we get to our first death, and at this point we're really having the power flex going on here, the more supernatural elements really digging in. And the first death is pretty gruesome and actually quite shocking in the way that it happens. And it escalates from there. Every death becomes more numerous or more graphic after this. And it is glorious in the way that it is done. It doesn't quite fall into full-on extreme horror, but this absolutely could have been written as an extreme horror book if Chuck had chosen to go into more detail with some of the gruesomeness in here. But we then start to see the internal struggle of Poppy as well as we run through this, which is really well done. We also have a sense of danger here, but it's that sense of danger you quite often feel the main characters, knowing that they're going to get out of this in one piece. And as is often the case with Chuck's work, there is subversions going on here, which I really, really like. Now, the last third of this book is absolutely bonkers in terms of what's going on. I'm not sure if it's a step too much on the bonkers scale for me personally. It's certainly skirting the edge of it. But the final revelation is well done. I like the way that Poppy eventually comes around and actually has a bit of a full circle moment as all the revelations hit home for how she's been acting throughout her life, as well as things that have been put in place beforehand, which she had no control over. And this appreciation for some of the people who have been around her really lands well. In terms of the writing, this is probably the easiest read of Chuck's books so far. Whilst I do prefer Bury Your Gaze, I think that is the best of Tingle's horrors so far. This is certainly better than Lucky Day for me personally, and I do like the themes in here as well. And the writing is such that I've read this in a little over a day, in pretty much 2 sittings. This has a turn paging quality and it clips along at a really, really rapid pace. So, do I recommend Fabulous Bodies by Chuck Tingle? Absolutely. If you are a fan of fast-paced, frenetic, blood-soaked horror, I think you'll enjoy this quite a bit. In many ways, this is perhaps Tingle's most accessible mainstream horror to date. I do still prefer Bury Your Gaze, but this is still very, very good, if a little bit bonkers in places. It has that sort of manic kinetic energy that the Beetlejuice movies have. So if you're into that sort of vibe, I think you'll have a great time with this. I'm giving Fabulous Bodies 4 stars out of 5. Now, in terms of the Don't Die July bingo board, this hits a number of prompts on there for me personally. The ones I'm going to mention here are survival horror, body horror, and killer on the loose. There's a couple others that this could potentially hit, but I'm not going to mention that here because that would give spoilers for some of the twists towards the end of the video. But this has been my review of Fabulous Bodies by Chuck Tingle. Have you read Chuck Tingle before? If you have, let me know in the comments down below. And are you taking part in Don't Die July? If you are, tell me what you're reading, what you're playing, what you're watching. I'd love to know more. Again, drop it in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all soon.